y'all, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Tayah and this is Tayah's Turning Pages. Hey y'all, future me popping in here. I just wanted to clarify a few things before we jump into the actual vlog portion. So when I originally filmed this video, I was going to share my thoughts with you guys when I got to the halfway point and then share my final thoughts at the end of each book. But I realized when I was editing the footage for Silver Nitrate that this video was already way too long. And I didn't even start nor film anything for Vampires of El Norte at that point. So I decided to cut out pretty much everything that I said when I checked in with you at the halfway point for Silver Nitrate, just because I did not want this video to be like 2 hours long. Okay, it wasn't going to be that long, but I really did not want this to be a super long video. That's why you might notice some jump cuts throughout the Silver Nitrate portion, but I just wanted to preface and say that. So with all of that out of the way, let's finally jump into the vlog. So we're back with another video for Tayah's THRILLtober.
Every time I pop out, he gets scared for you.
If this is your first video of mine that you're stumbling across, I just wanted to say that Tayah's THRILLtober is essentially just a month-long event that I created for myself. It's really just something where I will upload more content that surrounds thrillers, dark romances, horror, and just spooky books in general all throughout October. As you can tell by the title, this is going to be another reading vlog. This is actually going to be a continuation of a reading vlog that I filmed last year, because the authors that are going to be featured in this video were actually featured in last year's video for Hispanic Heritage Month. For those of you who do not know, Hispanic Heritage Month runs from September 15th all the way until October 15th. And last year I did a Battle of the Books reading vlog where I read Mexican Gothic as well as the Hacienda, because one, I wanted to compare and contrast both books, because even though they are not 100% similar, there are some similarities between the books. And I also just wanted to highlight those two authors because, like I mentioned, it was Hispanic Heritage Month. So I decided to keep up the tradition and do it again this year because both came out with new releases. Really excited to give both of these a read because they just sound so good. But the books that I have here are Vampires of El Norte, and I also have Silver Nitrate. And y'all, can we take a second to appreciate both of these covers because they're both giving what they need to give, especially Silver Nitrate. I think that this cover is so sick. Like, look at that. It reminds me of some like Twilight Zone imagery. Hopefully you can see it with my ring light. I don't want to turn it down because then it's going to mess up the lighting, and y'all already know my lighting situation in this room is a hot mess. But this cover is giving. But I also really love this one too. This cover as well as the Hacienda both have like women just looking so distraught on the cover. Here's the Hacienda right here, and as you can see, we got the girlies looking back, looking around, trying to figure out what is going on, what environment they're in, and why things are going awry. As I was saying, these are the two books that I am going to read for this reading vlog, and I'm so excited that these two authors have come out with new releases because, like I mentioned, Mexican Gothic and the Hacienda are two of my favorite thriller/horror books that I've read, and I just have a feeling that these are also going to be hits. I'm actually going to start reading Silver Nitrate first, simply because this book is shorter than Vampires of El Norte, and I just want to make sure I'm setting myself up for success for this video because I am on a time crunch and I'm running my October/spooky season content schedule like the Navy. So your girl has to stay on track. But it is a little funny that I am reading Sylvia Moreno Garcia's book first because for my original reading vlog, I read Mexican Gothic first. So again, we're just keeping up the tradition in every way possible, and I love that. But I just wanted to kick off this vlog now because I am going to start reading this book tonight and hopefully finish it by Thursday, maybe Friday at the latest, but we will see. It's really not that long of a book. This one is only 315 pages. I do feel like this plot is a little bit more convoluted, and I think I am going to have to give a bit more brain power to this one versus Vampires of El Norte, especially because there are fantastical elements I think included in this book, and y'all know I'm not a fantasy girly. So it always takes me a little bit of extra time to finish fantastical or fantasy type of books. So yeah, but either way, I'm still excited to give this a read, and I cannot wait to see what ride Sylvia Moreno Garcia is going to take me on with this book. So I'm actually just going to read the synopsis for this because I couldn't put this in my own words even if I tried. So right here in the flap it says, from the New York Times bestselling author of The Daughter of Dr. Moreau and Mexican Gothic comes a fabulous meld of Mexican horror movies and Nazi occultism, a dark thriller about the curse that haunts a legendary lost film and awakens one woman's hidden powers. Boom. Montserrat has always been overlooked. She's a talented sound editor, but she's left out of the boys club running the film industry in 90s Mexico City. And she's all but invisible to her best friend, Tristan, a charming if faded soap opera star, though she's been in love with him since childhood. Then Tristan discovers that his new neighbor is the occult horror director, Abel Lloreta, and the legendary author claims that he can change their lives, even if his tale of a Nazi occultist imbuing magic into highly volatile Silver Nitrate stock sounds like sheer fantasy. The magic film was never finished, which is why Lloreta swears his career vanished overnight. He is cursed. Now the director wants Montserrat and Tristan to help him shoot the missing scene and lift the curse. but Montserrat soon notices a dark presence following her, and Tristan begins seeing the ghost of his ex-girlfriend. As they work together to unravel the mystery of the film and the obscure occultists who once roamed their city, Montserrat and Tristan may find that sorcerers and magic are not only the stuff of movies. In Silver Nitrate, Silvia Moreno Garcia conjures the tale of movie magic and supernatural suspense. This just sounds like it's going to be really good. Despite being convoluted, I think that this book is going to eat. And I just love the fact that this is set in the 90s. And then of course you have the whole movie slash film and curse aspect going on. So I just think that this is going to be a wild ride. And I can't wait to dive into the story. And then once this is wrapped up, we'll move on to Vampires of El Norte, where I'll read the synopsis and give you guys the rundown on this book. Now, of course, these are not direct comparisons, nor are they as similar as Mexican Gothic and the Hacienda. So I'm not going to base my rating or base which book I like more. Another thing that I wanted to say is y'all are probably going to see me with this scarf or multiple scarves throughout this video because baby, my hair, I'm going through it. Okay, I'm going through it. Honestly, trying to figure out when I'm actually going to get my braids refreshed. With all of that out of the way, let's jump into Silver Nitrate.
I get those goosebumps every time you come around, yeah. You ease my mind, you make everything feel fine. Worry about those comments, I'm way too numb, yeah. It's way too dumb, yeah. I get those goosebumps every time I need the Heimlich, throw that to the side, yeah. I get those goosebumps every time.
Hey y'all, so it's actually been a few days since I last checked in with you. It is officially October 8th, so it's a Sunday, and I wanted to give you my final thoughts on Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. But before we do that, I did just want to say, yes, I will be wearing these sunglasses throughout the entire portion because I look crazy right now. And I don't really have anywhere else to film this because I did not feel like driving all the way to my parents' house so I could, you know, set up shop in my library. I just didn't feel like doing that today. So we're in my car. We're going to have a little car chat about Silver Nitrate. And the lighting in here is not the best, and you guys know I'm also not the best lighting technician anyway when it comes to my camera setting, so I couldn't figure out the lighting myself, and I just realized I looked disgusting. I'm sorry, I cannot film this without these glasses in good faith, so it is what it is. But let's get into the reason why we're really here. I am not even a horror girly, and you guys know that, but this book has solidified her as one of my favorite horror authors because this book was incredible. I definitely will be checking for her and her books more in the future. I already have, but I'm really going to go back and like read Velvet Was the Night and maybe even give The Daughter of Dr. Moreau a try. That one is really out of my comfort zone, I feel like, out of all of her books, but because I love her writing and her storytelling so much, I might have to just say F it and just give it a try. Her mind, big brain over here. Just had to get that out of the way first. Obviously, I didn't check in with you guys when I made it to the halfway mark, but I wanted to go back and comment on a few of the earlier points that I made, with one of them being specifically about the curse. These characters, and just in general, people need to be more careful about what they play with, especially when it comes to the paranormal and just spirituality and things like that, because you just don't know exactly what type of Pandora's box they're opening up. And that was so evident and rang true throughout this entire book. And I was just so nervous for Montserrat, Tristan, and Abel Lloreta because I just couldn't imagine doing what they did and not thinking that there weren't going to be consequences. That was the one thing that I genuinely did not understand about all three of them. More so, I guess, Montserrat and Tristan, because Lloreta already had experience with this type of curse, whereas Montserrat and Tristan did not. And for them to not take it as seriously or really think about, like I said, the repercussions as much as I feel like they should have was really wild to me. And I definitely think they learned their lesson. I definitely think they did. Like I mentioned earlier, I thought this book was incredible. And that, of course, is a testament to the plot and the storytelling, but also the writing. The way in which Silvia Moreno Garcia is able to tell a story and paint a picture is unmatched, especially for a horror book. And again, I'm not a horror girly, so I don't really have too much to compare and contrast. So reading Mexican Gothic and reading this, she is a very talented writer, and she is so good at imagery and atmosphere, and that is something, of course, that you need when it comes to, I think, horror books in general, especially like Gothic horror. But for this one specifically, truly felt like I was immersed in the story. I love the fact that this book takes place in the 90s. There was just no interference really from technology or social media or anything like that. Like, this was just straight up horror. Tristan and Montserrat were really just out here, feet to pavement, and trying to figure out this mystery. And so I just really like that because it felt like a nice break. Going back to my point, like I said, Silvia Moreno Garcia really kills it with the imagery and the vividness of her descriptions and just the things that the characters are meant to see. Similar to Mexican Gothic, there were a few sightings and hallucinations and just images that the characters saw throughout the book, and they were terrifying. Like, I don't know how Silvia Moreno Garcia is able to write some of these hallucinations and scenes and descriptions, but I've said before that I don't like gore, I don't like graphic imagery. It's really funny that I pick up her books and I love them. I wouldn't say it's like super extreme horror or anything like that, but it is something that will make you weak in the knees and a little squeamish if you are one of those types of people. Me. And there's something else that I really want to touch on as it pertains to her writing and her storytelling and just this plot, but of course I'm not trying to spoil it, but y'all, I might have to. I will put a timestamp that you can skip to so that way you can get to, you know, the spoiler free parts, but I really do have to talk about this because it really is an integral part of the story. So like I said, this plot and Sofia Moreno Garcia's mind, big brain, because she has such a unique take on social horror and melding that with paranormal horror, in my opinion. I noticed in Mexican Gothic that she spent a lot of time really dissecting the topic of white supremacy and upholding white supremacy, and also too how it can trickle into so many different facets of life. And the way that she is able to really get that point across and really get that horror and that fear across while using fantastical elements in her stories is just so cool to me. I love social horror. I'm a big fan of it. Jordan Peele is one of my favorites. I also think that Tiffany D. Jackson does a great job with social horror, but I do love Sofia Moreno Garcia's take on it, especially as a Mexican woman. She does have a different perspective on social horror to an extent. I just really enjoy hearing other people of color's thoughts on these types of topics and how it's specifically detrimental to them and their community. So even though we don't know, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I think his name is Ewers. One of the main characters' names in here, or his last name, is spelled E-W-E-R-S. So I guess it's Ewers? I don't know, y'all. Even though you don't fully figure out what Ewers' plan was once he was able to be resurrected, you can only imagine. With him being racist for one, but also his thirst for world domination and just trying to really making sure that the top of the top remains at the top and the bottom of the bottom remains at the bottom. And so again, even though you don't fully know what his intentions were or what his plans were, you can deduce from this plot and just the topics surrounding race and eugenics, you can only imagine what he was intending to do. And that is so horrifying when you really think about it, especially from the lens of a Black person or a person of color. It is just so scary to think about an individual like that existing, but for them to have powers like magic under their belt, oh my god, oh my goodness, that is so terrifying to think about. This is a very Lovecraftian-esque type of story. I loved the show Lovecraft Country, and I'm so mad that it got canceled. I understand why. I know that there are a lot of things that went into the decision of canceling Lovecraft, but it still makes me sad, and I still mourn it because it was just so different and so creative, especially because the main characters were Black, and they were essentially doing the same thing that Montserrat and Tristan were doing, fighting against racist entities and powers and systems that be. And then for the showrunners and the producers to flip the script and turn the Lovecraftian world on its head because HP was also racist. It was essentially like a big F you to him since they casted Black actors to play these leading roles in the show. And then of course, like I said, to fight those entities. I just loved how all of that was like intertwined. And she mentions in the author's note, let me find it. Hold on. In a very small press anthology titled THRILLtober, I think that's how you pronounce it. That story was reprinted, The Book of Cthulhu, in 2011 and gave me a certain amount of cachet among the Lovecraftian circle. So there is Lovecraftian inspo, and I just loved that so much. So I wanted to get all of those thoughts out of the way before we jumped into the characters. First things first, starting with Yorueta, we'll get him out of the way. I will say that I do pity him, and I actually did feel sorry for him because I can imagine being famous, being larger than life, to having it then taken away from you, and now you're back to, you know, being an average person essentially and struggling to make ends meet. I just think about that all of the time, and just the concept of fame and how much of a tightrope that is to walk. I really did feel bad for his character, but I still think it was a pretty shitty thing for him to get Tristan and Montserrat caught up and not really be transparent and tell them the full truth. Now moving on to Tristan, he just is very selfish and has made a lot of mistakes, but I don't think he's a good friend. The way that he treats Montserrat to me was very off-putting, and it gave me the ick. And he knew he was able to treat her like that because Montserrat was essentially like a lovesick puppy for him, and they have been friends since they were kids. There's definitely some codependency going on in their friendship for sure, but I just don't like the fact that Tristan was kind of like dog walking Montserrat from time to time. But like I said, I do chalk a lot of that up to the fact that they were codependent on each other, and that kind of brings me into my next point, that I don't really like the romance aspect of this book. Like, I actually don't like it. I thought I was going to like it because I was intrigued in the very beginning, but as I got further and further into the story, I do think that the romance could have been like left out of this book, to be honest. I mean, there wasn't anything super wild that happened in regards to that, but I just think that it was a little forced. I will say that that's probably like my only critique about this book, is that I do think that the romance part of this was a bit forced. Now we're going to move on to the star of the show, the leading lady, no pun intended, Montserrat. I thought that Montserrat was actually very funny, and I loved how like deadpan and dry humor she was. I also really love the fact that she was so brave and so fearless, even though she admitted internally that there are things that scare her and that she is fearful of certain things. You wouldn't have really known it because she really took, I feel like, a lot of this stuff in stride. So those are all of my thoughts on all of the characters. There are some other ones, but I just did not want to get into all of that. So overall, my rating for this book is going to be a 5 out of 5 stars. Duh. I feel like that was very obvious because this book was just incredible. And with me gushing about it the way that I am, I feel like you could already tell. Silvia Moreno Garcia is definitely an author that I'm going to keep on my radar, and I cannot wait to go back into her backlist and specifically pick up and start Velvet Was the Night. That book has always intrigued me, but because I never read anything by her when it first published, like not even Mexican Gothic at that point, I didn't want to pick it up and not like it. And I'm glad I didn't, because I feel like if I would have read that book or Mexican Gothic or even this book when I first started my Booktube and Bookstagram journey, I don't know if I would have given her a fair chance, just because this is not a genre that I typically read, and I don't normally read books like this. Like, this is very out of my comfort zone. And so I'm happy that my reading tastes have evolved and expanded over this time, because I'm now more open to picking up different books in different genres. This was a great start to this vlog. I'm so happy that this is a 5-star book. So with Silver Nitrate being finished, I am finally going to move on to Vampires of El Norte. Like I said before, the Hacienda is one of my favorite gothic horror books of all time. Isabel Cañas did her big one, and I'm so happy that more and more readers are picking up that book and are giving it its flowers, because it's what it deserves. And I'm not really a vampire girl for real. Like, I don't go out of my way to consume vampire media and like art. It's just not something that I do. I don't have a problem with it, I just like don't really prefer it. But again, really love this author's writing and storytelling and the atmosphere that she creates. This and the Hacienda actually reminds me of one of Selena's album covers. Does that not look very similar to this as well as the Hacienda? I genuinely do not know anything about this book, so I'm going to read the synopsis right now. In the flap here it says, vampires and vaqueros face off on the Texas-Mexico border in the supernatural western from the author of the Hacienda. As the daughter of a rancher in 1840s Mexico, Nana knows a thing or two about monsters. Her home has long been threatened by tensions with Anglo settlers from the north. But something more sinister lurks near the ranch at night. Something that drains men of their blood and leaves them for dead. Something that once attacked Nana 9 years ago. Believing Nana dead, Nestor has been on the run from his grief ever since, moving from ranch to ranch, working as a vaquero. But no amount of drink can dispel the night terrors of sharp teeth. No woman can erase his childhood sweetheart from his mind. When the U.S. invades Mexico in 1846, the two are brought abruptly together on the road to war. Nana as a curandera, a healer, striving to prove her worth to her father so that he does not marry her off to a stranger, and Nestor as a member of the auxiliary cavalry of ranchers and vaqueros. But the shock of their reunion and Nana's rage at Nestor for seemingly abandoning her long ago is quickly overshadowed by the appearance of a nightmare made flesh. And unless Nana and Nestor work through their past and face the future together, neither will survive to see the dawn. If both of these can be 5 stars, wow. Wow.
In this mansion, I'm Macaulay Culkin, paid in full, I'm a car fight. Know you're tired, we just did dinner for 3 hours, lying to me all night. Buying B&'s Benzes out of spite, paid 100, ran on something light. Simple price to keep them out my life. Booby trap, we need a business office. Magic City need a business office. 29, I keep a business office. I'm in love with Houston, Dallas, Austin.
Hey y'all, so it's actually been a few days since I last checked in, but I did finish Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. Y'all, this book, Isabel Cañas can do no wrong in my eyes, truly. I thought that the Hacienda wowed me when I read it last year, and while I still stand 10 toes down in that, this book really solidified Isabel Cañas as a force to be reckoned with, but also as a new auto-buy author for me. The first thing that I really wanted to touch on with this book is that I was completely wrong when I said that this book and Silver Nitrate do not compare in any way, because they definitely do. I'm not saying it's a 100% copy and paste. Surprisingly, I did notice some similarities with this book as well as that book, and really what stuck out to me the most in terms of comparison is the fact that this book is also very Lovecrafty. I love the fact that both Silvia Moreno Garcia and Isabel Cañas drew inspiration from that genre to create their story, but of course they put their own unique spin on it. So if you are going to read this book, I definitely recommend reading the author's note, because Isabel Cañas talks about how she even came up with this plot and what really inspired the story. When I read that author's note, my jaw was on the floor, because it's such a brilliant concept. Especially for me, from a creative standpoint, I have to give her 10s. Who would have thought that this tidbit of information that she came across was able to, like I said, inspire essentially this entire plot. And now after reading this book, I realize how much I truly do love the Lovecraftian genre because of the way that these authors are able to meld paranormal and fantasy horror with social horror. I just think that that is a perfect recipe for truly scaring the shit out of somebody, at least me. These types of stories really do hit harder. Really getting into the nitty-gritty of these types of books, digging for the deeper details, reading in between the lines, and just truly understanding where the author is coming from because they have a shared experience or background as you. It truly is a match. Representation in general matters, but especially like in forms like these, I feel like they really do matter. These authors are able to articulate a lot of these feelings and thoughts that a lot of us have and put them on paper. So like I said, if you do plan on reading this book, I definitely recommend reading the author's note. Do not skip it because it really does provide some great context as to how this book came about. And honestly, it made my appreciation and love for the story go even deeper because of that. I love when history is intertwined with fictional stories, aka historical fiction. I don't love all historical fiction though, but this type, yeah, I'm here for it. Especially reading this book and then now having the historical context and knowing the sinister edge that Isabel Cañas was able to add to it. I love it. And expanding on that point a bit more, I do think it's more poignant when an author really centers the oppressed in their stories, especially these historical fiction stories, but giving them those POVs and monologues for them to really communicate to the reader how these types of events that affect them, their homeland, their culture, are so compelling. Of course, it's tragic, but I do think that those elements do help really drive the point of these types of stories home. Now I want to really get into the atmosphere and the characters themselves. Starting with the atmosphere, y'all, this book was terrifying, okay? Like the Hacienda definitely spooked me when I read it, but this one really did a number on me. And social horror aside, the vampires that Nena and Nestor and the rest of the folks in their homeland had to face, oh my goodness, the way in which Isabel Cañas is able to paint vivid pictures of what these vampires slash monsters slash El Cucos look like was chilling. I thought that she did such a great job at balancing both showing versus telling, especially as it pertains to these vampires. And just reading about how violent and bloodthirsty they were. Ooh, like it actually sends chills down my spine. Like you guys can see it. Like I'm thinking about it now because I was actually really spooked reading this. And I read a lot of this at night, which was not smart on my part, but I was reading a lot of this book at night and I genuinely was kind of looking over my shoulder. I also just really loved the emphasis on Mexican culture as well as just the urban legends and lore that the community has. I just thought it was so cool how Isabel Cañas was able to take those stories that she has heard growing up in her childhood and in her community and really being able to work those into the story. It just felt so much more authentic and genuine. Okay, so now I really want to get into my thoughts on Nestor and Nena because I have so much to say about these two, their relationship and their journey. First things first, I loved both Nestor and Nena. Okay, I did. I'm sure that there's probably some people on Goodreads that hated both of them or only hated one of them versus the other. I loved both of them. They felt authentic. And similar to, I feel like, Isabel Cañas's writing and storytelling, Nena and Nestor's relationship and their journey was not black and white. It was very nuanced. There were so many different unfortunate circumstances and optics that really worked against them in their relationship that led to the results that we got. And even though it was frustrating reading about these two going up and down, I totally understood why Isabel Cañas went in that direction. And honestly, I think it made their romance even more moving. All of the events that led up to Nestor disappearing from Los Abuelos and leaving Nena are just so tragic. Felt like my heart was ripped out of my chest and stomped on when I really got to understand what went wrong between Nena and Nestor, especially because I already felt attached when you're first introduced to them in this story. I'm pretty sure they're children, so you get to see their upbringing, so you already have a preconceived notion of who they are. You really get to see a first glimpse into their friendship and their bond, and to know that it was broken for 9 years was just really tough. And I was definitely side-eyeing some characters in here that had a hand in that, but I did have to remind myself that this book takes place in the 1800s, specifically I think 1846. Obviously there are a lot of societal norms and customs that both Nena and Nestor have to uphold no matter what. So I totally get that and I understand that point, but it still didn't make those parts of the story easy for me to read through, especially with me always being on my feminist soapbox. Okay, I really had to shut off my feminist brain when I was reading this, and really when I read any historical fiction or romance books, because that's just, you know, the time period, it really does require that. But it was really hard for me to do that, especially because Nena was such a strong character. And I know some people who have read this probably disagree with me. I felt like when Nena represented and what she ended up doing and what she had to do throughout this story when it came to her family and her father, as well as just, again, fighting these vampires, I just felt like she was such a strong character, and she really was able to do what she could with the resources that she had, or really I should say the little resources that she had. She went through so much, especially with her only being in her 20s. She lived a life. I just felt really bad for her, and it really does put into perspective for you all of the other women that were like Nena during this time period, what they had to endure, what they had to face, and having to be silenced because of just their gender and, again, the time period. It just really sucks. And obviously we still have a long ways to go, but for my girlies in the 18 and 1900s, my heart breaks for them, because I just couldn't imagine having to endure what they had to endure and living a life like that, where it feels as though it's not even your life because you don't have that autonomy. There's nothing you can do to stop it. There's nothing you can do to go against it. That kind of goes into my next point of Nena being expected to marry someone who is well off. And this obviously presents some conflict between her and Nestor. With Nena, like I said, trying to fight these vampires, and her family as well as others not caring about her maybe saving the day or figuring out the real plot that is at hand. They only cared about her reputation and who she was going to marry. They didn't even care about her life. I just really had to say that because Isabel Cañas really dug deep and really hit me in the feels. Going back to my earlier point of Nestor and Nena's story just essentially being tragic, again, at least in the beginning, I genuinely felt bad for both characters, because while I understood both Nena's feelings towards Nestor and Nestor's feelings towards Nena, both of them were dealt shitty hands and they played them the best that they could, especially Nestor. And to know exactly what he endured and what he experienced, being in his head, and then also seeing how Nena reacts to Nestor and not understanding fully where he's coming from, it was rough, okay? It was brutal. It really was, because I really wanted to just shake Nena sometimes, and vice versa. I wanted to shake Nestor. There were so many instances where if they would have just communicated with one another, things probably would have been fine. But I do think having that dramatic flair add to their relationship really did help make this story even more engaging and more gripping, because not only are you invested in them fighting against these vampires, but you're also invested in them fighting to be with each other, fighting all of these other factors like in this family, as well as just the societal expectations that they're supposed to uphold. Them trying to fight all of that to be together was also just as compelling and gripping and thrilling. So I was invested in both sides of this story, and to me, she's incredible at writing emotional romance. And so I would love for her to kind of try her hand at writing a romance book, because I feel like she probably could be like Ashley Winstead, where she could be successful in multiple genres, especially with her books already being genre bending. I could see her writing a romance. So Isabel Cañas, if you do somehow watch this video, please consider writing a romance book, because I will definitely buy it and read it. Those are all of my thoughts on Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. My rating for this, if you couldn't tell, an easy 5 out of 5 stars. This was a fantastic book and definitely lived up to the expectations that I placed on Isabel Cañas' future work after reading the Hacienda. So I'm so happy that she is 2 for 2 for me. That is a wrap on this reading vlog. These books really had me thinking philosophically and really had me thinking in retrospect. It's so cool to see what you can do with words and writing and literature, especially if you are one of those authors that likes to genre bend and meld so many different things together. All right, y'all, and that is a wrap on the first official reading vlog for Tayah's THRILLtober. So I hope you enjoyed. Definitely make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me and my channel out. And definitely make sure you follow me on Bookstagram and Storygraph. I will leave all of that information linked down below, as well as at the end of the video, like I always do. I will see you guys in my next video.